Well, welcome in everyone to Tiger Vision's weekly college football rundown show. After further review, I'm Jay Smith. Alongside Bradley Kendall, we've got Evan McDowell in the studio in the back. We're going to be bringing you a special edition of After Further Review tonight, Conference Championship Preview. It's a lot of good games to talk about. We're going to hit on all the big Power 5 matchups this weekend. Let's go ahead and dive right into it, Bradley, after further review.
We got some rematches and teams looking for some revenge this week. We got 5 really good games on tap for the conference championships. Arguably, probably the best Power 5 conference championships we've had in the playoff era, I would say. Yeah. We'll start out with the Big Ten. Very noteworthy one, especially because we have the only undefeated Power 5 team left. We got the Wisconsin Badgers right now. As you can see up on the screen, Wisconsin taking on Ohio State. Ohio State looking to play spoiler and trying to work their way back in. What do you got on this game, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State's got 2 losses on the season, so a lot of people have already kind of written them off. Obviously, Wisconsin has been a lightning rod of controversy all year long because they're undefeated. Still not getting a lot of love from the committee. I think they're at 4th right now, but a win against Ohio State, I could see them getting bumped up to 2nd or 3rd, honestly. Really impressed with Wisconsin's ability to run the ball all year. We've talked about that on this show a lot. We've had a couple callers about that, but my biggest concern with Wisconsin is their ability to throw the ball. Hornibrook is just...
He's inconsistent.
That would be an understatement. I mean, you see him throw the ball, and it just is cringeworthy. So, honestly, if I'm looking at this matchup, if Wisconsin's able to come out and establish the run early on, I like the Badgers' chance in this game. But I think Ohio State, you can never write off Urban Meyer. We saw that they were able to hang around against Michigan last week in a big rivalry game. They were able to get it done on the road, too. So, I think it's a toss-up. Personally, though, I'm going to have to go with the Badgers.
It's not going to be about the quarterbacks. Hornibrook, like you said, has been very inconsistent. 9 out of the 12 games he's had this year, he's thrown a pick. So something to work on there. Ohio State's secondary is a bit suspect. You saw Nathan Stanley from Iowa light him up. Did not anticipate that coming into the season. I'm going to go with the Badgers. JT Barrett's hurt, coming off of that. I believe he had surgery today. Looking forward to next week. So not only that, but the fact that Jonathan Taylor is finally healthy again and playing like the running back he's been in the beginning of the season. He tore up Michigan's defense when he played him earlier this year. And Ohio State's defense, I just don't think they're going to be able to stop him. I think Barrett's going to struggle to get the ball down the field. And it's going to be kind of like that Michigan game, except I think Wisconsin's just the better team here, and I think they end up finishing out the undefeated season. So I'll go Wisconsin 28-20. That was my prediction.
Throw there into the back. We'll see what Evan has to say about this one.
Yeah, I've got Wisconsin in this one, too. The Badgers, the only undefeated Power 5 team left in the country, and a big running back duel in this one. I mean, you got Jonathan Taylor, who basically carries Wisconsin on his back each time they hand him the ball. But in the backfield for Ohio State, you've also got Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins, the freshman. They've been a nice little tag team duo throughout the year. So, like I said, I think this game's going to come down to quarterback play because as far as I'm concerned, the running backs are pretty even, all of them really good. So it's going to come down to how well Alex Hornibrook wants to play and how well JT Barrett can play after having that arthroscopic knee surgery today. He is going to go on Saturday, so he's going to be the X factor for Ohio State. If he plays well, they win the game. If he doesn't play well, maybe isn't completely healed from that injury, then I don't think they're going to do very well. But Wisconsin got that stingy defense. They're second to country in defensive efficiency and one of the best red zone defenses in the country. As far as scoring this year, the only points scored against the Badgers, 3 field goals and 3 touchdowns. So if Ohio State is going to win this game, they're going to have to find a way to break that Wisconsin defense. But I got the Badgers as well, but I think it'll be close. Might come down to a field goal. 2017, I'll take Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it took an outrageously great performance for JT Barrett to even beat Penn State, to even get them in this situation in the first place. So I think that, it's going to take him, he's going to have to carry the team to get them any chance to win this game, and I just don't think he can do it with how banged up and how inconsistent he's been this year. So I would agree with you, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. I was looking, though, and saw that Wisconsin's had a lot of success with the tight end position this year, and that's something that Ohio State has struggled against defensively. But, again, I think overall, if Wisconsin's able to come out of the gate early, establish that running game. I mean, it seems to be the mantra for Wisconsin is run the ball, run the ball, run the ball until you have to throw the ball. And if Ohio State is not able to stop them running the ball, then I think that this one will be over in a hurry because Wisconsin will just be able to manage the clock and they'll be able to control the flow of the game.
Yeah, I think so, too. I mean, I think it's really going to come down to the first half. Ohio State's been a slow starting team, and Wisconsin really likes to just chew clock. We got a caller in right now from Wyatt Street. I think he wants to talk more about this game right now. Wyatt, can you hear us?
Hey guys, I can hear you.
All right, what you got, man?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers, future Big Ten champions.
I like the pick.
Currently a 6.5 point underdog to Ohio State.
I think Wisconsin's going to come out on top. for me, it's their running game and their defense that's ridden them all season, and I think it's going to come up big again. Like you guys mentioned with JT Barrett, if he's not 100% healthy, I don't have faith in Ohio State. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I can't have faith in them if he's not going healthy.
Yeah, with an inconsistent team, especially with a banged-up quarterback, the team that Ohio State does not want to face right now is Wisconsin, one of the top defenses in the country. So it's really going to come down to defense. It's not a lot of flashy offenses here, which is why I think it's going to be kind of a lower-scoring game. I think Wisconsin has thrived on that the entire season, and that's kind of the game that they want to play. So unless Ohio State really just comes out guns and blazes, I don't see this getting anywhere past 30 points, and I think that's the game Wisconsin and Paul Chryst want to play. So that's why I think the Badgers end up winning and go to the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just feel like it goes back to Wisconsin's running game. I mean, if they're able to establish the running game, and then you have JT Barrett kind of in limbo health-wise, you're just not really sure. Now, we did see, Ohio State has pulled out second-string, third-string quarterbacks before and pulled out some miracles, but I just think that it'll be a tough road for Ohio State to get it done against Wisconsin. I think a lot of people are not giving Wisconsin a lot of credit. They went undefeated regular season. This would be a huge statement win for them at the end of the year. I think honestly more people are expecting Ohio State to win this game than they are Wisconsin, and I think at the end of the day, Wisconsin is going to play with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to come out guns blazing, and I think they're going to try and control the tempo of this one.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Wisconsin has a lot to prove in this game, and they're going to go out and prove it.
Yeah, I honestly, like you said, I think Ohio State's too focused right now on the scenarios they even need to get into the playoff and not worried about winning this game, which is the one thing they have to do to even be considered. So, I think we all like to pick Wyatt. I think Wisconsin looks like the better team right now, so we got a clean sweep across the board for the Badgers. Wyatt, we appreciate the call, man. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll transition over now into the Big 12 Conference Championship. First time that we've been able to talk about a Conference Championship in the Big 12. We've got the Horned Frogs of TCU and Boomer Sooner of Oklahoma. Bradley, what you thinking about this matchup?
I went back and forth on this game pretty much all week. I've been a very, very big supporter of Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma. I feel like they got a little bit disrespected this week in the playoff rankings. I had them at second. But honestly, like I said in the beginning, it's going to be a lot of rematches and a lot of revenge games. And I think this comes out to be one of them. And we've seen how crazy college football has been all year and how surprising it's been. And I think Gary Patterson and TCU are the team that no one's really talking about right now. They're down at 11. Talk about disrespect. They're outside the top 10 with really no avenue right now to get into the college football playoff. And I think that's going to change right now. I think they beat Oklahoma. I like Kenny Hill.
Wow.
Oklahoma, their defense it's really tough to rely on, like we talked about with Ohio State's offense. They really stopped TCU well in the first game they played them. It's really hard to replicate that 2 times in a row with a defense that's very suspect. One thing I noticed when I looked back at the box score in the first game is that Oklahoma did not score in the entire second half against TCU.
Yeah.
So
let off the gas a little bit.
The game was over at that point.
Yeah, they let off the gas.
But to not score at all, there's room for improvement for
some would call
TCU.
that sportsmanship.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say that, but I don't know. I think Kenny Hill, that was one of his most inconsistent games of the year, and I think he's got a real good chance to bounce back. And if it really comes down to it, it's gonna be the battle of the quarterbacks. And I think Baker Mayfield's just done so well all year that he's doomed for a bad game at some point.
I disagree, because if you look at Baker Mayfield, he has said repeatedly over and over the last few months he came back to school to complete his goal of winning a national championship. Right now, he has the Heisman essentially on lock, barring a completely disastrous performance in this game and/or a bowl game. Because now bowl games are after the Heisman is awarded. So essentially, he has the Heisman locked. It's his to lose at this point. So if he is able to get past this game, you look at TCU, they're ranked 11th right now. They still have, at best, an outside chance of getting into the playoff, even if they win this game convincingly, in my opinion. So I feel like Baker Mayfield, this is why he came back. This is the situation that he's prepared for. He's done everything right up until this point all season. So I think for those reasons, that's why I'm picking Oklahoma. I think, honestly, you can sit here and look at the matchups and where there's benefits for TCU versus Oklahoma, but I think at the end of the day, it's just going to be Baker Mayfield's will to win this game. Evan, what you think back there?
I'm with you, Jay. I think Oklahoma and specifically Baker Mayfield is just going to be too much for TCU. Now, I will say on this article on ESPN.com, everything you need to know about the Big 12 championship, it's got the X factor for Oklahoma listed as their kicker, Austin Siebert. He hadn't missed a field goal since the Iowa State game back in the first weekend of October. And TCU is the #1 red zone defense in the Big 12, kind of like being the tallest midget, I guess.
They're the only defense in the Big 12.
Exactly.
So they lead a lot
so
of categories,
if for some reason Mayfield and the Sooners get inside the 20-yard line and can't get a touchdown, you might see a lot of field goals there. But I mean, in their first meeting, it was 38-14 at halftime, and the final score being 38-20. So even though TCU's defense didn't allow Oklahoma to score a single point in the second half, Oklahoma's defense only allowed them to score 6, and that was in the fourth quarter. So I just think Oklahoma's going to be too much. Mayfield over 4,000 yards passing on the year, 37 touchdowns, 5 picks. He's also got 245 yards on the ground and 5 rushing touchdowns. I just don't think, even though TCU has allowed a combined 3 points in the second half of their last 7 games, I think they're still going to be in search of their first Big 12 championship after Saturday. I see a lot of points being put on the board, most of them being put up by the Sooners. I'll take 42-28 Oklahoma over TCU.
Yeah, I think it's going to be close. And, if it's going to be a blowout, I think Oklahoma ends up doing that to TCU. I don't think TCU has the capability to blow out and outscore Oklahoma that much. But
no.
They've done this before. TCU, remember back when they played Oklahoma State, a pass-first offense, I think the number 1 passing offense in the country. They were able to really neutralize Mason Rudolph well. They were able to keep him, put him in tough scenarios where he had to make some interesting decisions, and he'd end up throwing a couple picks. So I think if they get Mayfield a little uncomfortable, maybe rush a few more guys than they usually would, I think if they can do that and kind of throw him off a little bit, then I like Garrett Patterson as a coach so much, I think they'd have a chance to pull the upset. So I'm not saying it's going to happen.
It's incredibly difficult to beat a team twice
so
in
difficult.
one season.
And you're not going to be at home like Oklahoma was. So
it's definitely not assured. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than what Evan thought with the 42-28 prediction. I see this being more in the ball. I think both teams are going to hit 40. I think there's really going to be a lot of fireworks on display offensively. And I think both teams are going to come out swinging. But I do think at the end of the day, like I touched on a little while ago, with Baker Mayfield, this is the reason he came back to school. He would be able to get a conference championship, possibly a Heisman Trophy, and then have the ability to once again, this would be Oklahoma's second appearance in the last 3 years in the playoff.
Correct.
And,
you're right, yep.
There's a lot on the line for Oklahoma and the Sooners. So, I think at the end of the day, I think it's a close game. It's a good game. Definitely one that you should tune into, but I think Oklahoma's going to get it done.
Well, then you might want to take TCU to cover. They're currently a 7-point underdog, only a touchdown, which is kind of crazy considering how lopsided their first matchup was. If you're looking to win some money on the Big 12 championship game, might as well take TCU to cover if you think it's going to be close there.
Do you guys think there's any outside chance that TCU can get into the playoff at all from 11?
No,
there absolutely no way,
there's no.
TCU
TCU at best will get into a nice New Year's Six bowl game if they win this game, but there's not a chance they're getting into the playoff.
And I don't think that's right at all. I think at a 10-2 team that has great wins on the year. They had a fluke loss against Iowa State, and then they had the tough loss against Oklahoma. But overall, they've been a pretty solid team. To be at 11 right now.
Evan, I don't know if you have a second, but if you could pull up TCU's schedule, who have they played top 25 wise
I know
on
they beat
the
Oklahoma
road?
State. They took down West Virginia, who's fallen off a little bit now that Will Greer's been hurt. They did lose to Iowa State, and they lost to Oklahoma. I'm trying to think. I guess the other teams in the Big 12, you could throw in Texas Tech and a Texas that they beat.
Yeah.
They have played Arkansas on the road, beat them by 3 touchdowns. At Oklahoma State and Stillwater, beat them by 13. At K-State in Little Manhattan, beat them by 20. On the road against Iowa State, lost by a touchdown. And then at Oklahoma, lost by 18. At Texas Tech, won by 24. So their 2 toughest road games, arguably, they lost. Well, if you count Oklahoma
This isn't a
State.
road game, though. So, I mean, it is
Well,
true.
it's not a home game.
But it's a neutral site
there's
game.
nothing. The conference championship is definitely not a home game for them. So I just think that the fact that they're they have the 2 losses, even if they're able to get the conference championship against Oklahoma, it would be a very impressive win. There's too many. You got Alabama sitting there at 5. And so Alabama can get in without even winning. I mean, you had a team last year that got in without winning their division in Ohio State. Now, we know how they turned out in the semifinal game, but point still stands. Alabama, I think, has a much better chance at getting in without a division title than TCU does.
It's an outside chance. I think they have a better chance than I'd say a USC would if they would win their conference for sure. But you're right, it is an outside chance. Probably not enough chaos to ensue going forward. We'll move on, though, to probably the championship game that not a lot of people are going to tune into, frankly, because it doesn't really matter. Like we said before, the USC-Stanford game. A rematch from earlier this past year. I believe USC won. Was it 42-24, I believe that score was?
Maybe. You'd have to kick it back to Evan back there.
Pretty convincing win. Mr. Bear back there, I'm sure you've got that score for us ready to go.
The previous meeting, USC beat Stanford. This was back in September, 42-24.
All right. That's a good memory there. But it's a different Stanford team. I've watched them the past couple weeks. They took down Washington earlier. They had a great win last week against Notre Dame, a very convincing win against Notre Dame. KJ Costello has been the lead man. He's really brought this team back from a one-man show, and Bryce Love, he's been the been the quarterback that they need to lead this team. He had a great performance last week against Notre Dame. And if you look at the common opponent, that's kind of one thing that I looked at. They're both pretty similar teams. The common opponent they played Notre Dame, Stanford handled Notre Dame pretty handily, and USC, let's just say, is going to try to forget that game from this past year against Notre Dame. So if you want to use that game to compare the two teams, I think Stanford's got a really good chance. I like their coach. I think the coaching is going to really come into play here for Stanford. If Bryce Love is healthy, I think that plays a huge role. And their defense has been so much better lately that I think Darnold's really going to end up struggling. I got him throwing maybe 2 to 3 picks this game. He's been a little inconsistent all year. I'm taking Stanford here, 33-27.
Yeah, I mean, Stanford hasn't looked good just these last couple weeks. They've looked good the last couple months. They've won 8 of their last 9. They had a rough start, I think the second week of the year. No, the second week of the year was the USC loss.
Yeah.
But then they had a road loss to San Diego State. And that was...
But they're a different team now.
That was a low point of the season, but they were able to rebound. You know, like you said, they've looked much better.
You could even argue that they're the USC of last year, losing a bunch of games
possibly.
early on.
I mean, their only loss, like
back.
I said, the last couple months has been a 3-point loss to Washington State, and then they had in Week 13 they had to beat Washington. I believe they did, 30-22, which got them into the Pac-12 title game after Washington beat Washington State. So, yeah, Stanford's really rebounded well, and it's amazing to see, how different of a program it is now versus what it was 5-6 years ago when they were really a consistent powerhouse up there near the top 5, top 10.
Yeah.
But I still feel like, you touched on it a little bit, Sam Darnold. I think he might be a tad inconsistent in this game. There's not too many people paying attention to this one, I think, because it's out on the West Coast, and it should be a 3:30 kickoff.
Probably so, yeah.
I don't know what network it's on. I was
Probably
trying to look
Pac-12
that up.
network, but I did see a stat.
5
ESPN.
p.m. on Friday, ESPN.
Nice.
Yes. Yep. Well, no, I got
Nice.
8 Eastern time. So you were saying 5 p.m.
Oh, 5
Pacific.
p.m.
West
their
Coast.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I'm
8
looking at USC schedule, so that's
8
why.
And
Eastern
that's
on
crazy.
ESPN.
They were talking today on how the Pac-12's doom, their demise this year, has been the scheduling. It's been the Friday kickoffs for some of the big teams. I think Washington lost on a Friday to Arizona State. The fact that they even scheduled their Pac-12 championship game on a Friday is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
But maybe that'll get more
Well,
people
no one
to
else
tune
is
in.
going to watch it if they play it on Saturday.
Maybe that'll get more people to tune in. So
Yeah.
I saw a crazy stat earlier today that said if Stanford wins this game, that'll be the 7th time in 8 years that they win 10 games in a season. That's pretty remarkable.
Wow, that's
for Stanford.
incredible consistency.
That's great coaching
Yeah.
from David Shaw. So
Well,
Evan, what you got?
I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to say about this game just because it's so irrelevant. If USC, I mean, the fact of the matter is if USC hadn't gotten beaten by 35 in South Bend, this game might be relevant and you might be talking about USC sneaking into the playoff because I don't think a 3-point road loss on a Friday night in Pullman to Washington State and my second favorite coach in the country, Mike Leach, I don't really think that's keeping you out of the playoff. The fact that you got beat by 7 touchdowns. And again, on the road in South Bend, but now we've seen that Notre Dame team is not as good as we once thought they were. That's what's keeping USC out right now. And Stanford, after starting the year 1-2, put together a nice little season, but I don't think they would have stood any playoff chances anyway. So that's why this game essentially doesn't really matter playoff implication-wise. I'm going to take USC winning in this rematch. It's going to be a lot closer than it was earlier in the year. I think it's going to be like a 10-point game or so. USC currently favored by 4 points. Stanford coming off that emotional home win against Notre Dame, that comeback win last week. USC last week was on a bye. So I think that's going to play into USC's preparedness. I think they're going to come out firing on all cylinders, put up a lot of points out of the get-go, and make Stanford play catch-up the rest of the way. So I'll take USC 34-24 over the Cardinal.
Mike Leach is your second favorite coach. Who's your favorite coach?
David Cutcliffe at Duke because he turned
Oh,
out
I
to
love
be
it.
Yeah.
Attaboy.
I told Bradley that I was
That's a smart man back
picking
there.
USC before the start of the show, and I think the more I look at it and think about it, I got to go with Stanford because at the start of the season, when USC and Stanford played each other at the beginning of the year, USC was flawless. I think Darnold only had 5 incompletions. USC rushed for over 300 yards. It was essentially the perfect game. And
Sam
then,
Darnold, 21 of 26, 316 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks.
And then you had, Notre Dame completely smash USC about midway through the season. And then you had Stanford that just pounded Notre Dame. Now, I know you can't use the transitive property here, but there's been a lot that has changed as the season has progressed. I feel like Stanford has gotten significantly better. I don't know if I've really seen a lot of significant improvement from USC. So I think that's why I'm going to switch my pick. I'm going to go with the Cardinal. And again, it goes back to, can you beat the same team twice in one season? I think Oklahoma can. I don't think USC can.
I don't think they can either. Yeah, you said it's a different Stanford team. Absolutely. They're a very balanced team this year. It's going to come down to Bryce Love's health again, like I said before. I think that's really going to be the X factor in this game. And I got Stanford winning. I believe, Evan, you had USC, right?
USC by 10. Yes, sir. That was my
Okay, so
prediction.
we got 2 versus 1 there. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's not going to play a huge impact in the playoffs, but I know if you're Desmond Howard, you're rooting for Stanford because I believe he had them winning the national championship preseason. And to see a team that you picked preseason to win the whole thing to lose 4 games in a year would be pretty embarrassing. So,
Well, next up, we'll switch over to the SEC Championship. This is the Deep South's oldest rivalry. These two schools have played each other 122 times, possibly the most even rivalry series you'll see. Georgia currently leads 57-56.
Wow, that's
so
a rivalry.
it is essentially a coin flip. You've got an Auburn team that has 2 losses. You've got a Georgia team that just suffered their first loss a little while. It wasn't last
At
week.
the hands
it
of
was
Auburn.
yeah. It was
a couple weeks
two
ago,
two
yeah.
weeks ago, and then Auburn last week defeating Alabama in the Iron Bowl. I feel like this is going to have the most eyeballs on it out of all the Power 5 games.
You want to talk about the closest rivalry? I think it could be the closest game we see. I mean, it's
Yeah.
at 50-50, I believe, right now, the betting line and the FPI, which doesn't really mean too much usually. But like I said, it's hard to beat a team twice. It's hard to hold a team that has Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb to only 40 yards twice. That's going to be tough to do again. Auburn, but, we've seen it before. They did it last week against Bama. If any team is going to do it and climb their way out of 3 really hard games like they had Georgia twice and Bama once, it's going to be Auburn. They've really been impressive the last couple weeks. But the big thing is going to be Kerryon Johnson. We talked about Bryce Love potentially being a little banged up. He got a little banged up at the end of last game, so his health is going to play a huge factor.
Evan, what do you think about this game?
I think I am most looking forward to this game behind only Clemson and Miami. I think this game is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot different than their first meeting that Auburn ended up winning by 23 points.
I think we all can agree it's going to be a lot closer.
That's amazing. This is the 3rd game in a row we've talked about now that has a rematch from the regular season. And another statistic, since 1992, the SEC Championship game has featured 6 rematches of regular season games, and the team that won the first meeting has won 5 of those matchups. One of them was Auburn when they beat the Gamecocks in the SEC Championship back in 2010, I believe.
Okay. Not so fast, though. I think that's going to change. I think you tack one more on for the team that got beat the first time. Do you come back and win the second time around? I got the Dogs in this one. I really wanted to pick Auburn. I just think it's so hard to beat a team twice, and a team like Georgia that really runs the ball well, and they got kind of hit pretty hard the first game. I think they bounced back this game.
Auburn's defensive line's the best that Georgia's seen all year.
It is, but I think Jake Fromm learned a lot from that first game, and if the running attack gets shut down early, I think he's going to be able to get the offense going a little bit. The game got really out of control. The final score might not have been a good judgment of how these teams really are comparatively. So I think Georgia's really they're going to have a lot to play for in this game. We got somebody calling. Thomas Marshall's trying to chime in right now. Let me get him on the line so we can have a little 3-way call here. Mr. Marshall.
Can you hear us,
Can
Thomas?
you hear us?
Not sure
try
if the
that
call
one
went
more
through.
time.
We'll see if we can get
Gotta
him back
love the Wi-Fi up
on
here
the
at Henry
line.
Student Center.
But
Well, while y'all work on it, I'll give you my pick and my reasoning behind it. So, like I already said, I don't think this game is going to be as out of control as the first one was, in which Auburn took a 30-10 lead going into the 4th quarter. But this is going to depend on Kerryon Johnson for the Tigers. Like you said, he's averaging 127 rush yards per game. He's got 17 touchdowns on the year. Both of those tops in the SEC. He is listed as day-to-day with that shoulder injury he suffered in the Iron Bowl. Auburn also has the 74th ranked red zone defense. So if the Dogs can find a way to get in the red zone, which they couldn't in their first matchup, I like their chances. I'll take Auburn 28-17 over the Dogs.
All right, now we're getting Thomas. He's been calling me about 4 different times trying to get in.
Your call has been forwarded.
And all right, I see how it is, Thomas. So
like I
now
said,
he's not going to respond to us.
We'll see if we can get him through. But again, I think this game. All right. Well, like I said, we'll wait for Thomas to call us back, and then if he gets
There we
through
go.
to us,
We'll let him make the decision if he wants to call us.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think again, this game has a lot riding
Here he
on it.
is.
Here he is.
Send him to voicemail.
Thomas, you there?
Yeah, I am there. It's been a while.
Hey man, you got to just keep trying. The phone lines are always open at After Further View. You just got to keep hanging up and calling again.
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
I keep getting a busy one. But I have to agree with what Bradley said. I'm going with Georgia on this one. I flip-flopped a lot on this game, and I was really looking at it, and I think Jake Fromm, this is his coming out game. This is a really big game for him. He's the X factor. And I see Auburn's running game, and I see it being non-existent in this second matchup. As you said, it's so tough to beat a team twice, and I just don't think with Kerryon Johnson not being 100%, Kendall Petway not being 100%, they rely so much on their running game. I know that defensive line is great, but I expect Auburn to show up for this game. I expect Georgia to show up as well, but I just like Sony Michel and that rushing attack that Georgia has.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, Thomas, because in the first matchup with Auburn, Jake Fromm threw 28 passes. Nick Chubb and Sony Michel combined for 20 carries. And Fromm in that game had a less than 50% completion percentage, and he was sacked 4 times. So it's funny that you mentioned that he's the X factor, and this needs to be his coming out game. And that two-headed rushing attack for Georgia needs to be in tip-top shape, because I completely agree with you. If Georgia's going to win this game, Jake Fromm's got to play better than he did the first time, and they got to put the ball in Nick Chubb and Sony Michel's hands more often.
I mean, Fromm, that was probably his biggest road test, you could say, the entire year. His first real road test of the whole year.
Yeah,
and
he looked like a freshman.
And he's still a freshman.
The freshman looked like a freshman. I mean, you can't blame him.
I think he's come a long way since then. They've tried to use him a lot more to try and get him a lot more reps and a lot more game-like scenarios like he's going to face in Auburn. So I think that they're a lot more balanced than they were a few weeks ago. The running attack is going to be there. I just think with the healthier rushing attack for Georgia and the fact that Auburn is coming off, you want to talk about 2 emotional games. They're really riding high. Eventually, it's going to fall back a little bit. I think Kirby Smart's a good enough defensive-minded coach that he figures out a way to stop Auburn, and I got him eking this out 31-27.
I mean, again, it goes back to playing the same team twice in one season. Can you get both of those games won? And I think at the end of the day, Georgia's going to come out and they're going to get this one done. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to be maybe see overtime, but it'll definitely be a fourth quarter. Do we know exactly when this game kicks off? Because I imagine it's
4 p.m.
They're usually on CBS, aren't they?
They'll be on CBS.
SEC? They're on CBS.
SEC Championship, always on there. And I agree with you guys. Auburn is the Cinderella team. We want them to do great. They're the George Mason that we want to see. I want them to win it all, but they're just gonna run out. And I see running out in this quarterfinal type matchup for the playoffs.
Oh, it's essentially an elimination game for both of these schools. What's your score prediction, Thomas?
I'm gonna go kind of a high scoring matchup around with you guys. I'll go 40-35.
I like that.
That's an interesting number.
That's like a national championship.
Yeah, that is.
I like that.
Yeah.
Hey, for what it's worth, Georgia right now currently listed as a 2.5-point underdog. This game being played in Atlanta, so a quasi-home game for the Bulldogs. When they marched into Jordan-Hare on November 11th, they were a road favorite in that game. You want to know how many points they were favored by?
11.
2.5.
Really?
Yep. So the roles have reversed here. They've gone from being a 2.5-point favorite and losing by 23 to now being a 2.5-point underdog. So we'll see if maybe Kirby Smart can use that as some motivation for his team, that they have switched roles since their last meeting with Gus Malzahn and the Tigers.
And what an impressive year it'd be for Kirby Smart and Jake Fromm. After losing Jacob Eason early on this year to bounce back, the committee takes into consideration if you lose your quarterback. Jake Fromm's been a great backup for him as a freshman. Really impressive. So he's going to have to come up big. Absolutely. Like you said, Thomas, I think he's really going to have to be the big man and get him going. So
Appreciate the phone call, Thomas.
Oh, anytime. Appreciate it, guys.
You mentioned teams, playing in a rematch and how well the team that got beat the first time has done. In their last 4 games, coming off of a loss in the previous matchup, Georgia is 4-0 against the spread and in those games.
Wow.
If this
for what
repeats
it's worth,
itself,
again.
we could see it happen, yeah. So you could see a potential Clemson-Georgia playoff matchup if Georgia ends up winning, which would be very, very interesting to see. So
Well, let's take a moment and look at, I think, the most interesting game this weekend. We've got
no bias
the
here at all.
ACC championship between Miami Hurricanes and the Clemson Tigers up in Charlotte. This is a win or go home, I think, for both of these teams. You had Miami lose last week to Pitt. Clemson has 1 loss on the season to Syracuse, but they both teams finished the season with only 1 loss. Miami with 10 because they had a game postponed because of the hurricane. Clemson with 11. You look at the series history; these teams haven't played each other very much. I think there's only
we remember the last game they
6
played each
and
other.
I think Miami leads the series all time 6-4. But the last matchup 2 years ago at Miami was a Clemson victory, 58-0, which essentially led to Al Golden being fired.
yeah.
But
I thought this was kind of cool that the last time that Ohio State and Wisconsin played in a Big Ten championship game, it was 59-0, and then you got this time, the last time Clemson and Miami played, it was 58-0. So hopefully we see some better games this time around. especially. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Miami bounces back. First time they've taken a loss. They've kind of flirted with it all year, but they've always been able to pull it out.
Yeah.
So Mark Richt, he's a great coach. He's been in this situation before. It's new territory for Miami because they've never been to an ACC championship game before.
Yeah, which is shocking.
Which is amazing to think about. They've
Shocking.
been in the league for, I think, 15 years now, since I
Yeah.
think 2002. So that's incredible. One thing I was thinking about on the way over here.
Tells you right there how good Florida State's been for for
Miami,
so long.
Miami
Virginia
joined
Tech.
the ACC in 2004. The conference didn't have a championship game until 2005. Virginia Tech also moved over from the Big East at the same time as Miami. And get this, Virginia Tech has been in the ACC title game 6 times since then. Georgia Tech's been in
Wow.
it 4 times, and even Duke made it to the ACC championship.
Yeah, they did.
in
I
the
do
last
remember
David
12
Cutcliffe,
years.
baby.
Yeah, that was a Cinderella story.
The X factor for me, I don't want to sound like this might sound a little interesting, but I think it's going to come down to the white wide receivers. I really do. Hunter Renfrow is the X factor. He's the guy that really can change a game. And Braxton Berrios at Miami. You saw him win the game for Florida State. They might go a little
Both
under the
token white
radar.
guys.
What?
Both token white guys.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, it may sound a little interesting to say it that way, but I think they're 2 of the guys that really can change the game on 1 or 2 plays right away.
I'll tell you who can change the game on 1 or 2 plays, and that's Travis Etienne. That is
Yeah.
who Clemson's team right now. You talk about the team last year, and they were built around Deshaun Watson being able to throw the ball and make big plays. This year, the strength is by far on the ground. You've got so many great backs to choose from, but Etienne is, as a true freshman, the explosiveness that he has brought back to the running back position at Clemson, I think is unmatched as long as I've been watching Clemson games. We've had some great running backs come through here, but for a guy so young, he just is able to change. I mean, you saw Hunter Renfrow's catch against South Carolina last week, and the 61-yard reception to start the third quarter essentially took the crowd and the opponent out of the game. But I still think your X factor for Clemson is Etienne. I mean, Evan, do you feel like it's a wide receiver matchup, or do you feel like that Clemson's strength is at running back?
I think both of these teams have the exact same strength, and it is not on the offensive side of the ball. I think this is going to come down to defense for both teams and whichever defense can make the last stop. So I don't think this game is going to be all that close. I feel as if Clemson should probably cruise their way through, not only because they have a better offense than Miami, but because they have a better defense. Now, a big reason that they have a better offense as of right now, Miami's offense is beat up. Mark Walton been out since about week 3 or 4, so he's not playing. They lost Amon Richards for the year with a meniscus injury in practice this week, and that was 5 days after their senior tight end, Christopher Herndon, who is second in the ACC in receiving for tight ends. He suffered his season-ending knee injury, like I said, 5 days before Amon Richards. So that offense missing a lot of key pieces, and really the only way Clemson's going to lose this game is if they keep feeding that turnover chain that Miami uses for motivation. Other than that, if they play the same game plan as Pitt, where they control the ball, don't let Miami get into a groove, and keep the ball, they're going to win this game no problem. They're 8th in the nation in yards per rush allowed, so as good as Miami's defense is, let's give our boys some credit as well. Also, 1st in defensive efficiency and the #1 strength of record in the country for those people that like to say we played a cupcake schedule. Exactly. So this is going to be our 3rd straight ACC crown if we can win it. Last time we won 3 ACC football championships in a row, 1986 through 1988. So it's been a while.
I didn't know
since
we'd
the
ever won
three-peat.
3 in a row.
I didn't either.
That's
so I started Googling
amazing.
around earlier. How about it?
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned the turnover chain. I think that's the big thing. Is last year Deshaun he threw more interceptions than Kelly has.
What, 17?
Yeah,
Deshaun Kelly hasn't thrown as many passes.
He hasn't, but Kelly I feel like is a little bit more conservative. So if he's able to come and make smart decisions against Miami's defense, that bodes well. I see it being a lower scoring game, but I still think at the end of the day, with Clemson's skill players, I think outmatch Miami's. Yeah. Especially at running back and also at wide receiver. There's just too many weapons across the field. Kelly Bryant has proved himself this season to be poised enough and to have enough, football smarts to make the right decisions in the crunch moments. I mean, he had to this point has not been in an environment that's too big for him. He was able to handle Louisville. He handled Virginia Tech. He should be able to handle the ACC championship.
So it'll probably be a home game.
I think there's only 12. Is there only 12? It was either 12 starters. It must be 12 starters that Dabo said on Tuesday. 12 starters for Clemson that have played in an ACC championship game. So there is some inexperience, but his team's used to big games. They're used to the big stage. This is Miami's first ACC championship game. This is the first week they've played off of a loss in over a year. There's going to be
a lot of uncharted waters.
A lot of emotion, though. I think it'll be a really emotional game for Miami.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying, Evan, Malik Rozier needs all the help he can get, especially with how he's played recently and with those, what did you say, 3 guys that are now hurt right now. That's going to be a killer for them. I think what you said, Jay, about the running attack, I think that's going to be huge. If Clemson can really get the running game going and get Travis Etienne involved a lot, him and Tavian Feaster to get them going. I think that's really going to open up the defense a lot more and allow us to attack them a little bit better on the outside. Because Miami's cornerbacks have been pretty solid all year. It's where they got most of their turnovers from has been interceptions on the outside. So if we can kind of get those guys thinking about the running attack as they're thinking about Kelly Bryant throwing the ball downfield, I think that's really going to help. And like you said, Kelly Bryant's prided himself all year on being efficient and not throwing as many interceptions.
And starting fast. Clemson has 115 first-quarter points through 12 games this season. Miami only has 54. Wow. So if Clemson comes out swinging, gets up by a couple of scores, that's where Miami starts to look vulnerable because they've had trouble. Like you said, they've played catch-up essentially every, a lot of games this year where they've had to put together some crazy fourth quarters in order to get it done. So if you put Miami in a hole of 2 touchdowns after the first quarter, you're right. You might, like Evan said, you might be coasting to the finish line if you're Clemson.
Well, there's only one scenario in my mind in which Miami needs to game plan around in hopes of winning this game, and that is to keep Clemson's offense out of the end zone. Because Miami is not built to play catch-up against a team of Clemson's caliber. You might can get away with it with some of those, coastal opponents, but you ain't going to do it against the Clemson Tigers. And they're also not built for a shootout. So if we start scoring a whole bunch of points and they start scoring a whole bunch of points, they're not going to win that either. So Miami is going to need to keep us from scoring while somehow scoring some points of their own. But like we saw last week against Pitt, Malik Rozier just can't do it on his own. Miami as a team finished with 45 rushing yards last week. That's not offensive balance. You can't expect Malik Rozier just to carry this team. He's just not capable of it yet. He's young. He's still relatively inexperienced in big stages like this. I know they played really well against Notre Dame, but a lot of that was due to their defense and some of those 29 turnovers that they forced on the year. So I think if Clemson could come out swinging and then play conservative down the stretch, I think the only way Miami's going to score the 17 that I'm predicting them to hit is some garbage time scoring late in the fourth quarter. I think going into the fourth, you could see the score somewhere like 30-3 or 30-7, depending on how it goes. I mean, it could be that bad if Clemson plays that well and Miami doesn't. Now, we could be surprised. Miami could come out, guns a-blazing and catches Clemson off guard and goes into halftime with the lead. But I just don't think at this point in the year, with Miami suffering their first loss last week at such an inopportune time, being so, beat up on the offensive side of the ball, that unless their defense plays the best game that they have played all year, I just don't see Miami being able to compete in this game. As the lines opened up this week, Clemson's already a 9.5-point favorite, which sounds like a lot to me. So even the sports books don't see Miami really standing much of a chance in this one. So unless everything were to possibly go right for Miami to win, I just don't see an upset coming.
And even then, I don't think it's even going to happen. I think Clemson's just too good. Like you said, Rozier, he's young. He's an experienced.
Well, we've seen Clemson not show up to games. You look at Syracuse.
Yeah,
I mean, Clemson just kind of idled their way through that.
Yeah, we had about half of an ankle in that game. So
and no kicker.
But all it takes is
that is one thing. If we're going to get into a shootout and they're able to keep us out of the end zone, if you have Alex Spence trying to save our season,
it doesn't have to be a shootout. It could be a slobber knocker. If you get into a
I
slobber knocker,
thought we were going to make it through the whole.
If you get into a slobber knocker and you need to kick field goals, I am not confident in Clemson's ability on special teams. It's just been inconsistent. It's like whenever we go to field a punt, I have a heart attack every time Ray's back there fielding a punt. If it's Hunter Renfrow, I can breathe a little bit. But it scares me every single time. So I think the only visible weakness that I see from Clemson in this matchup is special teams.
Yeah, Rozier, he reminds me a lot of Josh Jackson from Virginia Tech. I think that's going to be the kind of game that we end up winning. I got it 35-20. Like you said, Evan, I think some garbage time can help Miami out a little bit there to help out some bettors potentially. Maybe see some bad beats on SportsCenter. But I got a 15-point win from Clemson and puts them right at the top at number 1 going into the playoff rankings.
Well, and to go back to punting just real quick, like you said, Jay, if this game turns into a battle of field position, in which case neither offense can get anything going and both defenses are playing really well, and we just see 3 and out after 3 and out, Clemson's better suited to handle that situation as well. Miami is not As good as Braxton Berrios is as a punt returner, they're not capable of competing with Clemson in a game of field position either. I think just across the board, Clemson is just a better team. I think on the right day, maybe Miami's defense is better, but if you look at the depth and just look at the talent that we have at each individual position, I think that there's no question we have one of the best defenses in the country, and certainly one of the best defenses in the ACC. So like I said, all the things that Miami needs to check off to go right for them, they would need every single one of them to go right in order to win this game. So that's why I think it's going to be a double-digit victory for Clemson on Saturday.
2 or less turnovers, we win. I think that's easy enough to sum it up right there.
Yeah. All right, Tigers across the board. So that's been it though for us. We've looked at all the matchups for the Power 5. When is the Army-Navy game this weekend, or is it
after the championship game?
It is the week after the championship, because it's always kind of by itself.
Yeah, it always
Army-Navy Saturday, December the 9th, 3 p.m. CBS.
Okay, yeah. Usually it's on CBS.
I saw Navy's jerseys and they look sick.
Yeah, we'll have 2 shows I think next week. One Tuesday at 8 o'clock, same time as always, and then we'll hopefully do one more show to wrap it up before the week of finals. We've had a lot of fun, though, this semester. Looking forward to our final week. Hard to believe this is our 3rd semester of After Further Review. Glad that Evan was able to join us last couple of shows, and we appreciate everybody in the back helping us out. We got Scout on Switcher. I think Jack's back there running audio. Ryan's doing the teleprompter. So we appreciate all their help on the production side. But for Evan McDowell and Bradley Kendall, I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.
And we'll leave you with this real quick. Does a straw have 1 hole or 2? Find out next time on After Further Review.
What does that have to do with college football?